This is, so at headquarters, you have Ben Bussey, Brad Bailey, Sarah Noble. We want to present to you an idea we have for the methodology for how we would solicit proposals for flying on future CLPS deliveries, something we call payloads and research investigations on the surface of the moon, which is called PRISM.
Introduce Kevin and Andrew.
Yeah, and Kevin, I think, is on the phone. Kevin works for Slipser, the life science, physical scientist, and then, unfortunately, Andrew Petro from STMD, I don't think is able to be on. But if you end up with questions related to life sciences and/or technology or HEO questions, feel free to ping them as well as us. We have a few slides to go through, and then we're hoping that there will be a whole bunch of questions that we'll try and answer. Brad's going to be, we'd rather people did questions in the text box. He'll interrupt me quite happily if there's a question that we should address then. If not, we'll handle them at the end. Only have about 10 slides, so the idea is to go through them quite quickly, and if questions relate to any of them, we're happy, obviously, just to come back to as needed. That said, don't do that. Okay. So why are we doing this? Why are we even not just? Why are we considering using a slightly different process? If people could mute or have a cough drop, either is fine. So one of the reasons for why are we doing this, rather than just using this, or at least considering not using the standard process? We've identified sort of several hurdles to do with sustained instrument development and flight, and those are either hurdles to the you guys, potential proposers, or it's hurdles at our end. So we're worried that we get feedback that there's a fairly high barrier to entry for proposals regarding cost, time, and institutional commitment, and this decreases potentially the number of proposals that we receive when we do, for instruments, when we do a solicitation. Our end, there is uncertainty about exactly what payloads are available from the community. We worry that a high rate of requests for proposals can produce proposal fatigue within the community. Current STMD practices can lead to long instrument delivery times, and with CLPS for trying to do things potentially quicker than has typically been done. Solicitation of reviewers for panels can be difficult, as quite often the entire community is proposing to an RFP. We want to have the ability to take advantage of flight opportunities as they come up, for example, international as well as commercial. And we really want to be able to prioritize the science goals through community buy-in. So a very brief history of how we've got to where we are. Regarding instruments to fly on CLPS deliveries, many of you know we did 2 calls last year. There was the NASA-provided Lunar Payload, which was a NASA internal call for near ready-to-fly instruments. We selected 13 instruments that were a mixture of science, technology, and exploration. That was very quickly followed by Lunar Surface Instruments and Technology, which was basically the same thing, but to the external community, and another 12 instruments were selected in the middle of last year. What we're talking about now is future calls, and we're planning to do a call approximately annually. This would be to both the internal NASA and external community. The goal is to head towards a PI-led science payload model for instruments using the ingenuity of the science community, as well as working out how to fold in. We have interest from international partners. So the first 2 deliveries that were selected are from...
So, sorry, just one note. We have quite a bit of interest in this. So we just passed the 300 person mark, and that's how many people we have allotted to this space. So if you are on the telecom line and cannot get into the Zoom meeting, please continue listening in, and I promise these slides will be posted as soon as we can. If you're not on the telecom line and you're not in the Zoom meeting, then, well, sorry. I'll try to send out an email letting people know that as well. All right, sorry.
So the first two deliveries that we've been selected as part of CLPS are two companies, Astrobotic and Intuitive Machines. The instruments that are flying were selected as part of NPLP. This shows the two manifests and also shows the instruments broken down by science, technology, and exploration. We also have the LCIP-P payloads that I just referred to. They're listed here, and these will essentially be the mainstay of the manifests for the next deliveries. So what is PRISM? So PRISM is an instrument solicitation for new PI-led investigations for either instruments, individual or suites of instruments that are either destination agnostic or they are uniquely adapted to study a specific lunar geologic terrain or answer a question that requires them to go to a particular place. One aspect of PRISM is, for NASA, is to generate a catalog of available instruments and technologies to help us plan for good productivity in the future. And as shown by the title slide, there is good collaboration between all divisions of SMD here and of SMD, as well as the other mission directorates, HEOMD and STMD. So by all divisions of SMD, what we mean here is we are interested in payloads that include, it isn't just planetary, it's Earth, helio, and astrophysics. So what we are proposing, and I'm going to go through that, and then I'm going to finish with a couple of slides, one that says how we hope this has answered some of those problems that we mentioned at the beginning, and then the last slide actually is questions for you people on the phone. So we're looking at potentially doing a two-stage process. The first stage would be roughly a 5-page proposal that does a general outline for what you would like to fly. So you would have to, the idea is you have your science goal, you have description of the instrument, science goals, any specific measurement requirements, which would include the need to go to certain types of locations, your technical parameters, obviously, synergy with other types of instruments, i.e. how you could be part of a suite, and we'll talk a little bit more about how to handle suites at the end. And also if there's merit for you to be flown on multiple deliveries, i.e. you would represent a good network science package. The idea is that the stage ones could be an open call, and so that we could receive them at any time, and also once you put one in, if something changes, you can revise that. And so what that does for NASA is it generates a catalog of potential available instruments. What we hope it does for you is this allows you, with much less overhead than a full-on proposal, tell us what you think is an interesting thing to fly to the moon. Once we have a CLPS delivery in mind, the idea here is that we will solicit for stage 2 proposals. And when we do for a stage 2 proposal, we will say where we're going to have that delivery go to. So if there's a particular geologic terrain, we're going to solicit for stage 2 proposals saying we're going to go here. We will encourage people who put in stage 1s where it's clear that their stage 1 is ideally suited to where the CLPS delivery is going to go. That said, we're not going to obviously prohibit someone from proposing even if they're not encouraged, but we are saying that a previous stage 1 proposal is mandatory to put in a stage 2, but remember that stage 1 is essentially open. And we may choose to solicit payloads for multiple flight opportunities at the same time. So we might say the next 2 deliveries are going to go to these 2 locations and propose. We're sort of, whether we do that will be dependent on what we get when we get the stage 1 proposals. So these selected stage 2 proposals will then form the basis of the manifests that become the task order, and for those, the task order is how we solicit a lander from the CLPS deliveries, the CLPS companies. So the task order will any of the 14 CLPS companies, we'll put the task order out saying we want you to fly these payloads to either this location or one of these locations, and then they propose and we pick one, and you are then flying on that lander. This manifest that makes up the task order could obviously consist of multiple successful stage 2 proposals and could include instruments that are sort of focused on that particular delivery site, but also do good science wherever they go on the moon. So we're expecting to do this, if based on the feedback that we get from everyone on the phone, if we end up with a 2-stage process like we're proposing, that we have to move quite quickly. The first, the instruments that we select possibly will go to a lunar pole in 2023, probably late 2023. It's not definite it's going to a pole. We're still juggling a couple of things here. It could still be a destination instead. And the expectation is that we will solicit these stage 2 proposals using the NRA process. Given time constraints for this first sort of delivery based on PRISM, it probably will be close to rebuilds just because of the time that it's probably going to be roughly a 2-year time frame for delivery from selection. However, I mentioned that the goal is within CLPS to do 2 deliveries a year. So we're very conscious of we can make things easier on proposers if they have more time from instrument selection to delivery, and so we do intend to try and stretch that time going forward. When we did the small sort of workshop at Survey to talk about instruments for CLPS, one of the feedbacks that we got was less oversight, less formal reviews would help with keeping the cost down. So our plan right now is to operate essentially in a Class D of for those who know the nomenclature, 7120.8 processes, which would hopefully go a long way in that direction. International participation is welcome. We'll talk more about that at the end. There are multiple ways that can happen. We have international space agencies who approach us with things that they would like to fly. As we come up with what is the right methodology for soliciting suites of instruments, which again we're going to talk about at the end, that is another opportunity that a PI could make an international payload part of that. Do expect to have participating scientists type programs for each of the CLPS deliveries is the goal, and the instruments are expected to fly, the initial instruments, like I said, in probably late 2023. So how do we hope that this helps you and us? So by only wanting roughly, a 5-page proposal, and again, that's one of the things we can get feedback on. If people think 5 pages isn't enough to get key information, or the opposite, then that's why we're doing this call, to get that feedback. But the goal is, by going to a 2-stage process and making the stage 1 proposal significantly less effort than a more typical formal proposal, we lower the cost and time and institutional commitment, and which we hope means that we get a lot more, we really do sort of blanket the community for their ideas. This allows us to obtain a clear understanding of what payloads and technologies are potentially available from the community. Going to the focus stage 2 approach, we think reduces proposal fatigue, because if we pick a location, particularly geologic location, and your instrument isn't sort of fine-tuned for that location, then you don't need to propose, as opposed to just proposing and then we pick the location. So we think it reduces the number of proposals most scientists will have to put in. We think the long lead times can be reduced, partly because by doing the stage 1 and doing calls like this, we will try and get information out, give you as much warning as possible, so that you know when we're going to be asking for stage 2 proposals. We think solicitation of reviewers for panels is easier because there'll be a good pool of people who didn't propose, who are therefore available. It's also key that we now have a catalogue of instruments, and this is useful not just for the CLPS deliveries, but sometimes we can have international partners come to us offering us a certain amount of spare capacity on one of their missions. And this way, we can then know that if we do a MOO for an instrument that there's stuff out there for people to propose to. So some questions for you. I'll go through all four, and then I'm happily going to stop, and we'll start to go through the questions. The questions, I'm sure you've got other questions than this, but sort of questions that we would appreciate if people could help us address is, does this two-stage process in principle lower the bar for you? A key one is, what is the best way of soliciting suites of instruments? We sort of really struggled with this. We could ask for a stage 1 suite, but if we do that, we know the question is going to be, well, how do I propose my instrument individually if it's good by itself or it plays well with others? And do we really therefore want to ask PIs to do multiple stage 1s, even if they're only 5 pages? Another option is we only ask for instrument proposals, but perhaps we allow extra space for PIs to discuss potential suites. So, this is what I want to fly, but if you fly me with A, B, or C, here's potential mass, cost saving, or enhanced science return, and that's the other way that we handle suites. Do we want this stage 1 to be just for landed payloads, or is it acceptable in want to ask for stage 1 for potential or future orbital payloads too? Or would people rather we, right now, focus on giving lander payloads and do a separate stage 1 for orbital payloads at some later date? And then also, as I touched upon, what is the best way of integrating international payloads into suites? So I am going to stop and leave these questions up, and hopefully out of 300 people, we've got some questions, and we have about an hour and a half.
We have a little bit of time. So there are a bunch of questions coming in, but as noted, please make sure that your question hasn't already been noted prior, or just put it into the chat window, but please put your questions in the chat window at the bottom of the Zoom window. There's a little button that says chat, and it should bring up an external chat window.
And also, just so if you think of things after our 2 hours are up, I'll go back to the first slide at the end, so you have all our contact details. It would be, we're happy to receive follow-on questions or unsolicited advice.
Right, and that's the take-home message really here is we are trying to get community buy-in into this overall process. So it's not fait accompli at this point. So it's still we're still iterating towards this way. So please provide input early and often. First question came in that was, will the LSIP-P payloads already be included in the catalog? My suggestion would be they need to submit a 5-page proposal along with everybody else. We'll be providing a template in that 5-page proposal that will provide a lot of the information that we're looking for in order to populate our catalog. And so we'll need everybody who's interested in flying a payload that's not already funded to submit into that catalog. Another question is, could you describe a little bit more about what 7120.8 is, Ben?
This is where you have to find your favorite engineer. There are essentially 2 technical documents, one 7120.5, which is what sort of a discovery proposal would do. 7120.8 is an engineer. Essentially, it defines the engineering processes that you follow to do with building an instrument or flying a mission. And if you compare the 2, .8, essentially you have less reviews, you have a bit more freedom, less oversight. So the expectation is if you go down that road, you're possibly less expensive, sorry. It doesn't mean you just wing it totally. You still have things you have to follow. All you have to do, actually, if you just search online for NASA 7120.8, there's a document you can easily find, and you can download the .5 one as well and read the 2.
Let's see. There was a question that says, if the call comes out late 23, how can you apply the payloads in 23? I'm not sure if that was a misstatement or whatnot, but ideally this call will come out in mid-2020-ish, give or take, for the stage 2 proposals. We would like to get the call out for stage 1 proposals in early 2020 so we can start to develop that catalog and really start to see what the community feels is one of the, some of the better instruments are, what are the instruments that are available to us to fly on upcoming CLPS missions, which will help us figure out where we want to go.
So one of the key parts of that template for your stage 1 is going to be when can you when can you deliver the instrument?
Yeah.
Or put another way, what is the amount of time you need from funding to delivery is perhaps the better way to phrase it. And that might be more than one answer. It might be, if you give us this, I can deliver it this, and there might be, like I said, more than one option.
Yep. Let's see. Let's see. The next question is it possible that orbiter missions can be manifested under the same process? Is the science community asking for an orbiter on-ramp?
So right now we have we have simplex and potential CubeSat calls that could be delivered by a CLPS. We're looking at 2 possible scenarios, at least 2, for acquiring new orbital data. One could be, like I said, either a simplex or a CubeSat type call, where we say that mission will be delivered into lunar orbit, essentially dropped off by a CLPS provider. A second option is simply a call for instruments, and then we would use a CLPS provider to do an orbital capacity. It's probably more likely that we will do the former first, which would be a call for some size, mass, cost, power range of an orbiter, but you would know that it can be dropped off into lunar orbit, so you can put all your logistics into that.
Okay, great. And maybe, well, this is a question that will probably lead into Kevin as well, but a question from Craig Peterson. When do you envision to start soliciting ISRU technology payloads? And so ISRU currently exists within the bailiwick of STMD, Space Technology Mission Directorate. And so it will largely be up to them as to when they have funding to start that process. But this creation of a catalog of instruments will benefit STMD as well as HEO and FLPSRA. And so I guess the take-home question there is, hopefully as soon as possible, we need further clarification from STMD as to when those funds might be available for flight instruments. Kevin, I believe you're online. I saw a note from you. Do you have any comments from the HEO FLPSRA point of view? If you are talking, you're on mute, so *6 might be the answer. Okay. We might reserve the right to come back to FLPSRA.
Brad, can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, we got you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so from a SLPSRA, or Space, Life, and Physical Sciences Research and Application Division perspective, for both biological sciences, fundamental physics, and physical sciences, we're looking at reusing some of the small sat technologies that we have, but we're certainly looking for instruments that can be used for detecting and analyzing in situ. But also we are looking for the specific science that can be actually conducted. And specifically, we're looking at specific science that must be conducted on the lunar surface. It cannot be conducted on the gateway. It cannot be conducted on ISS to understand a particular biological, physical, or fundamental physics phenomena that you want to study. And so, we're looking, aside from the instruments for detection, we're also looking for the specific science research. And then we have, there'll be specific areas that we are targeting as well for our current need in the beginning, which includes, both, one of the things it does include is also characterization of the environment. That could also inform the type of science that can and should be conducted at later times as well. So.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And as I said, as we go through the list of questions, hopefully Kevin will stick around and answer the FLPSRA relevant ones as well. So let's see, we did get a couple of people saying the two-stage process is helpful and does lower the bar, and it's a splendid idea, so we'll take all the kudos we can get. We're not bashful. Let's see, the stage 1 proposal include cost estimates, and that's an absolutely it will. It will be part of the template, yes. So are these calls for instruments only or for support technology as well?
You missed one.
What information link, we'll come back to that one.
Okay.
Are these calls for instruments only or support technology as well? And I think the answer to that is we are also looking for a technology that would advance science on the surface of the moon. You know, there are, of course, the Matisse, Picasso, Dali calls that come out for instrument development up through various levels of TRL. But if new technology would benefit from a flight to the moon and we deem it valuable to science overall, then yes, they could be flown.
But I also think that this question might mean if I have a technology that's enabling to instruments, so if I have something that would let other instruments survive the night, can I propose that? I think the answer is yes.
Yes, I think that's the question, yeah. Yeah. Let's see. What information or length would be needed in a stage 2 proposal? I think Ben was saying specifically that we're aiming to keep these short. It's largely meant as informational, so 5 pages.
Stage 2.
Oh, stage 2. Typical Rose's call.
15.
Yeah.
Making that slightly longer, but probably not a lot longer.
Yeah. Here.
15 is the typical Rose's length. We may consider making that slightly longer, maybe 20.
Yep.
But to be decided.
I mean, that would be good feedback if people feel that the standard 15 isn't enough, given the fact you already have done a stage 1, or so feedback on that would be. You know, we're normally thinking that if people want, if there's a justification for why you'd like something different, then please pass that on.
Okay. Let's see. Can you describe the review process? Will step 1 be reviewed, and how would the review panels be constituted?
So
we're staring at one another. 1 second.
Sure, like the other step 1s in planetary, they'll be reviewed for relevance to make sure that they are appropriate for the program, but they will not be reviewed for technical content.
Let's see. There was a question here about could stage 1 proposals be kept under 2 pages, which be easier to propose instruments. I feel a little bit like 2 pages may not provide us with enough information to make an appropriate judgment call on whether they're appropriate for us. However, as Ben said, we're open to suggestions, and we can take a look at whether 2 pages plus a template would provide the information that we need. We're open, and that's definitely a moving target.
And even if we go to 5 pages, it doesn't mean you have to fill it.
Yep.
Because remember, these are, as Sarah just said, these aren't being reviewed sort of in the classical sense. So if you think your 2-pager gives us the information, all the information we need to consider your instrument, then that's what you would do.
Let's see. There's one that says, I think people should be able to propose suites in stage 1, and I think that is absolutely correct. We will actually encourage people to submit suites of instruments in the stage 1 process. That doesn't mean that if you have a specific instrument and you've gotten together with 3 friends and put in a suite, that you can't also put in a separate 5-page proposal just for your own instrument as a standalone instrument. So the availability is there to provide suites, and as you recall, for CLPS, we are looking for instruments that will be able to tell a full scientific story, or at least a better part of one, on the surface. And so suites of instruments that are well integrated will probably stand a better chance of getting selected for destination specific. CLPS landing opportunities. Let's see. What TRL level does the proposed instrument need to be in order for stage 1 proposal?
We are less concerned about TRL level than with when you think it can be ready to fly. TRL levels are sort of in the mind of the beholder anyway.
Objective, yeah.
So we are more concerned with what date you think you can have a ready-to-fly instrument.
But don't send a TRL level 2 instrument to us. Let's see. Stage 1 proposals will be dependent on landed capacity. For example, will landed vehicles have ascent and sample return capacity?
So right now, the CLPS providers do not have a sample return capacity. I encourage you to go and read the user guide that many of the CLPS providers have. If you look at the manifest of what we're flying, this actually touches upon the next question as well. They're both flying roughly 40 kilograms. Several of the providers can take a little bit more than that, but we're not looking at 400 kilogram instrument suites here.
However, I will say that if you have an instrument or a technology that necessitates sample return and think that this is a capability that we need to start requiring from our CLPS providers, we need to hear it. And so don't be afraid to say, look, this is where our mind's at, this is the instrument suite, and we think that sample return is necessary. Then absolutely put it in, and we can start engaging the providers about ultimately providing that capability long term. It may mean that you may not fly for several years, but at least we can start the development process therein. Can the payload be a technology demonstration or a science instrument? And I think we already addressed that. But again, we are partnering with both HEO, SLIPSRA, as well as STMD. So we envision a wide range of science investigations, exploration-centric investigations, as well as technology demonstrators. So the full gamut will be represented in these calls as funds become available within each mission directorate. Let's see, I lost my place.
It seems like a big issue for instrument suites.
Can you read it? I'm not sure.
It seems that a big issue for instrument suites is that needs to be some knowledge of the limitations of power, mass, comm, and cost. Are those being specified at stage 2 or stage 1? I think they will most likely be specified at stage 2. One of the goals of stage 1 is for us to understand what we need to ask of the providers in order to enable different science questions. So if we start to, for example, to see that there's a whole set of science questions that require higher power, then that's something we can start to reach out to the CLPS providers to make them aware of. So I would say for stage 1, you tell us what you need, and that will help us. But yes, I totally understand that for your stage 2 proposal, you will need to know what sort of the limits are of those parameters that you've mentioned.
Sure. So Alex says many remote sensing payloads have utility on the surface as well as in orbit. So a means to indicate in stage 1 proposals that given instrument will be tailored for orbital or surface operations will be worthwhile. That's absolutely going to be one of the questions on the template that we provide that we require you to fill in. More page limit questions, 5 pages too little, maybe 10.
Next one. Is it possible for NASA to provide a list of instruments of interest to NASA? The answer is no. The answer is this is why we're doing the stage 1, to see what's out there.
Yep. Let's see. Jacob says, stage 1 to include orbiter payload sounds nice. What are the implications for doing it or not? Why not initially considered? And I think part of the answer to that is that the CLPS providers are not currently, we haven't engaged the CLPS providers significantly enough to say we would like you to provide an orbiter most of them, all of them currently are focused on landers. And so again, coming back to the central theme of if this is what the community needs, then we can take that information back to the CLPS providers and ask them to start developing those capabilities.
Yeah, so I think the answer is, I think that's the second or third kind of comment that we've got, that we're hearing that you the community, would like to be able to do stage 1 to cover orbital instruments.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Can international participation be from a commercial company? That's an interesting one. As you know, NASA, we cannot give money to a foreign entity. So if there's an international commercial company that wants to donate an instrument that they want flown, that's not clear cut whether you would come straight to the agency or whether you would probably more likely find a US PI, perhaps with another instrument, and you would be part of a suite.
Where and when will the catalog be available to us? So that's something we've been talking about for a while. As we don't want to provide intellectual property data out to the wide community, but we also recognize that if someone has a neat idea for an instrument, but they're not sure about other instruments out there that they could pair with, how do we make sure that they are able to find the right partner for their instrument in order to create a suite of instruments? And so we're still toying with the idea of whether or not to make the catalog public outside of NASA. Sarah is shaking her head rapidly in my direction. And so I will say it's undecided at this moment with a heavy lean towards no.
No, but there are other things we could do. We could, for example, have workshops to bring together anybody who is interested and wanted to, do speed dating or whatever matchmaking sort of opportunities. So if the community has ideas for ways to help that sort of matchmaking happen, we are open to them, but we can't make.
Yeah, we can't make the full. I don't want to make sausage in front of everybody. So heavy lean towards no at the moment at this time, but we recognize the need for a mechanism to bring people together for these suites of instruments, and we promise we will provide them. And I promise that's not an empty promise. And that's not an empty promise. What's next? Are there payload requirements and interface details of the 2 landers for astrobotic intuitive machines? There are user guides available for all, or at least the original 9. I'm not sure the new ones have come out yet, but at least the original 9 all have user guides available. You can take a look at that and understand what some of the capabilities and limitations are to the lander. Bless you. You're welcome.
The term RFP. Okay, the term RFP was used in a prior slide to refer to a solicitation. Please keep in mind this can limit proposers. Yeah, apologies. I used RFP in a very generic request. I didn't mean it in the formal sense. As we mentioned, we're going to use, the plan is to use probably an NRA. So I didn't mean to use it in the formal sense.
Oh, let's see.
Question for Kevin.
Oh, there's one of those there.
A comment.
Okay. Question for Kevin. Kevin, if you're online, in the SLPS portfolio, there are fewer instruments currently qualified for in-space use as opposed to US on ISS. Do you envision any different processes for funding development of such units?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Brad?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's something we'll need to take into account, is possible development of detectors or instrumentation to do the analysis. So, yeah, we understand that all of our platforms that we really have are for ISS, but what we are also doing is looking at our CubeSat platforms that can be integrated on these CLPS platforms, and how we would then SLPSR can fund that part of it in terms of the instruments, and then how we would integrate with the funding for the science itself. So depending upon the need and how we look at it, we'll determine what parts we will go through and fund
Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, sure.
Is there any limitation on the size of payload, or will you provide standard sizes? And
again, I think the idea here is you tell us in the stage 1 proposal what mass you need, and then we have to weigh up the merit of the, we're also we're paying for the delivery. The heavier things are, the more expensive they are. So, but it gives us an idea of how much payload mass we need to address different science questions.
Yeah.
And again, we point to the user guides for all the various CLPS companies. They can give you some idea of payload capability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How will this weave in Picasso and Matisse? I mean, Picasso and Matisse are technology maturation programs, whereas what we're asking for is essentially things that you think you can fly in a reasonable amount of time. As Sarah said, we're not too focused on TRL. We said the first call, you're likely going to be needed to provide something in roughly the 2.25 year time frame from selection. As we go forward, we're going to try and increase that to give proposers more time, but that's sort of separate from Picasso and Matisse continues, and they are just
and Dolly as well.
Dolly, yeah.
The pipeline for producing. I'm hopeful that the instruments that are being funded under those lines right now will eventually be in part of this catalog and ready to fly.
Will the call identify science areas of interest, for example, physical sciences, astrophysics, biological sciences, etc.? So, of course, step one, sorry? Oh, yeah, all of the above. Step 1 proposals are we're open to anything and everything. So all science disciplines across the board we're entertaining. Now when we start narrowing it down to the stage 2 proposals, of course that will necessitate a couple of different, it will necessitate understanding of how much money is available from SLPSRA. If SLPSRA doesn't have any funds to devote towards that upcoming CLPS delivery, then of course we will say no biological instruments, PIs are discouraged to apply. You're welcome to submit something, but wouldn't waste your time. So I think it will be largely dependent on funds, as well as where we plan on going to on the surface of the moon may dictate what science is available from those specific sites as well. So it will depend on several factors as to what the stage 2 call will actually entangle.
But all the STMD divisions come under what we do. So we're astrophysics, helio, or Earth, and it raises, many of those will be, I suspect, based location agnostic type payloads, and so. Just to reiterate, one of our challenges is going to be when we're coming up for the manifest for a delivery is the breakdown between instruments focused on that site, but not at the expense of never flying things that could get good science anywhere.
Sure. Bob says, are science or technology objectives specified along with the site? Absolutely.
Well, I would say that's part of your step 1 proposal, to say if you fly this to INA, this is the science we're trying to get, and therefore we want to go to INA. Now, if your same instrument could do different science at different locations, we need to think about whether that we need to give people the chance to do that.
Right. I was more talking about stage 2 proposals and what we're actually calling for.
Oh, okay.
Right, when we're actually calling for sites. I think the real point, though, is that our science objectives are delineated in all our various guiding documents, ASM report, SCEM report, et cetera. So we don't need to put them in the call. They're already out there. You guys should be justifying how your instruments are going to help us.
You guys go.
Will the possible instruments include only science-focused instruments, or also instruments to further spacecraft lander bus subsystem performance and capability? That's interesting. We hadn't had that before. We said that we would consider technologies that would help do better instruments. I don't think we're looking to fly subsystems to help future lander providers. If that causes you angst, then I would say let's get in contact with us separately, and maybe you can explain in more detail why the answer to that should be yes.
What about mobility solutions as well?
No, I think the way to handle mobility is if you're unless you've got very specific cases, I think saying that your instrument either needs to be on a mobile platform or would benefit from being on a mobile platform would be part of your stage one, because mobility is something that I think is on us to provide, and we're already considering different ways of doing that, either by having, when we would do the stage 2 call, saying there would be mobility. So again, it would be useful to know whether you're happy on a static platform or whether you need mobility. And maybe you need to be placed on the surface away from the lander, so that all that information any information like that should be included in stage 1.
What's the process for reviewing stage 1 proposals and determining which to invite for stage 2? We're going to have a quick stare at each other moment. 1 second.
So I think the answer to that one is when we're getting ready to ask for stage 2 proposals, so we've already picked that. Let's go with the previous question. I'm not saying it's anyone's favorite, but it was called out about INA as an example. We would look for stage 1s that specifically said they wanted to go to that kind of geologic terrain, and they would very likely be encouraged to propose. But as we put in the slides, we're not going to tell anyone that they can't propose. I think something we hadn't thought of is for all the instruments that are location agnostic, whether we need to tell those PIs, encourage them every single time we do an opportunity for stage 2. The answer might be we haven't actually thought of that part.
Work in progress. Would network science instruments need to submit to each call on an annual basis, or once selected, they could fly on multiple missions?
That is a really good question that, again, we hadn't worked out exactly how we were going to handle. I mean, if in your stage 1, I imagine you would tell us, we would like you to fly 3 of these, and here's why, and perhaps this is the distribution on the moon to make it worthwhile. Whereupon, depending on funding, we would have to decide, it's probably impossible to say now whether we would have the ability to pay for 3 of them up front. The answer is probably no. So the answer, but there might be, this is why we're doing this. You've raised something we hadn't thought of in detail that we'll take away and think on.
Okay, great. Do you have a process in place to review, certify, and integrate ITAR or classified technologies?
Well, the answer to that is ITAR, you're meant to handle at the proposal stage from your home institution. So your proposals should all be ITAR compliant, I believe, or you shouldn't be proposing them. And I don't think, we are not set up, no?
You can propose things that are ITAR sensitive, that we have to review them specially.
Okay.
To make sure that no foreign folks are involved in the review and whatnot. But there's a process for doing that. It's the same as for all the other.
Okay, I take it back. Okay.
Great. How do rovers fit in PRISM?
Again, this sort of go back. I think if your instrument needs to be on a mobile platform, you let us know at the stage 1 process.
What if they have a mobile platform they would like to propose?
Then we'll be soliciting for that in a different way, not this.
Okay. There's a suggestion for 2 categories of stage 1, one for suites and one for individual instruments, and location agnostic. Noted?
Yep, noted.
ISRU, I think we're all in favor. Yay, ISRU. Future CLPS landers be able to survive lunar nights. Again, this comes back to our statement of if it's required for your science to be successful, and then we need to hear about it so that we can start putting the CLPS providers on alert that this is a capability that the science community needs and they need to start developing it.
But that said, as we touched upon earlier, right now the providers don't have that capability, and so you are realistically looking at missions in a 10 to 12 day, well, the polar ones might last for longer, but the non-polar ones are likely to be 10 to 12 days-ish. So I think it behooves you to say, if you are a non-polar instrument, that this is the science that we can get in that, show that you can get science in that time frame. But also, yes, it's great for us to hear if we could survive the night, this is all the extra science. And there's also whether you just need to survive the night to the next day or whether you need to operate during the night. Those are two separate requirements.
Right. And well, for what duration? I mean, years, seismometer, or, et cetera. Sorry, we're reading and comprehending in real time. Apologize for the squeaky wheels you may hear.
Okay, so we have one that basically is saying they don't think they're not sure that 5 pages is the right way to do it.
Right.
Look at that.
We'll take that one into consideration as we go forward on how to structure stage 1 proposal. We talked about rovers already.
That said, I mean, I'm wondering, would you be allowed to propose a rover as part of the instrument suite? I mean, I think if you've got very, I think right now the answer is probably no, but it doesn't mean you can't separately let us be aware that you think you have a mobility solution that we might be interested in.
Elaine says, could this process be adapted to provide flight opportunities for instruments on commercial missions that are flying outside of the NASA commissioned CLPS missions?
At this point, I would say the answer is no. That might be something that we revisit down the road, but right now the answer is no.
We talked about how long instruments should survive. Specific TRL we've talked about. Is there expected cost range for upcoming stage 2 calls? I think our current going in position is that for each, Ben's giving me the head shake.
Yeah, so right now we have to wait and see what the budget, we're aware that whatever number we throw out, some people are going to be unhappy, and so we're trying to make sure we can have one of the values to us of doing the stage 1 is to make sure that we pick a number, that we go with a number that's large enough to make sure we get to do enough science, and I think my take from talking with the community is there are, we've probably got a few deliveries where a modest number is okay, but we're certainly aware of really good payloads out there that are going to always require a little bit more, be that mass, power, volume, or whatever. So again, I think for now, we will try and give people a heads up ahead of the stage 2 call, but for now we're asking for it's one of the key pieces of information we'll get from the stage 1 is what are the costs for things. Again, going back to the 7120.8 way of doing things, in case that does allow you, this is different to how you would necessarily do an instrument that would fly on a discovery mission.
Can you describe in more detail from Carly what you expect to be in the catalog? How detailed will the capabilities be? Ben went over a list of at least the high-level ones that we're going to be after, but there will be, like I said, there's going to be a template that we'll be sending around for folks to fill out, and all of that information will be included within the catalog. At this point, it's still in flux, and so I'm not sure we have a detailed list of what actually is fully entailed there. Will we distribute a template? Yes. There's a long paragraph question above that. We'll get back to it. Can you guys read that while I'm going through the rest?
Yeah.
Entry-level TRL for step 1 proposal. We've talked about TRL already. Kevin, this one's for you. and I'm not sure that you can speak to HRP, but you probably more so than anyone else. Would a medical device that could be used for human monitoring research be applicable for this program?
Can you repeat that? My phone just cracked out when you're
Sure.
letting me know what the question was.
Yeah, sorry. Most people are drowning my voice out now anyway. Would a medical device that could be used for human monitoring research be applicable for this program?
Yeah, that's something that I can't answer for HRP, considering that these experiments and studies are going to be basically uncrewed and without human use. It's likely that we, at least on our space biology side, will likely not provide interest into that yet. So, we're really looking for things that are studying the non-human analogs and how their biology is reflected and affected by the lunar surface. So anything related to basically technology to monitor human health would be something that would require humans and is probably more applicable to the cislunar and possibly the landers. And that's something that HRP would need to weigh in on it as to what their interests are.
Right, and just to expand on that just a little bit, we are partnering across all mission directors in the HRP. If they choose to put some skin in the game, we would be happy to fly an HRP relevant mission to the surface. As Kevin alluded to, though, you need to make a strong case for why the lunar surface is the best place for that instrument. So just keep that in mind as we move forward with your step one proposals.
We heard a couple along similar lines where people are talking about the fact they have an enabling technology. There's one about solar power, and there was one here about coatings to do with instruments. What I would say to both of those is you submit your step one. If we think they fall under an STMD, we would hand that over to our STMD colleagues to see whether they felt it was worth flying.
Let's see. More length questions, TRL length. Sorry, we're duty is.
So what would you say constitutes ready to fly? We haven't said ready to fly. What we've said is we'd like to know how many months it would take you at your requested funding level to be able to deliver the instrument. The next one about once a step one goes in, is there a means to update them? The answer is yes. That's one of the key things we want to allow you to be able to do. As you said, if you get a new subcomponent that improves the capability or makes it lighter or cheaper, etc., then we'd want to hear that.
So we skipped one. It says, is this the proper place to discuss delineation between the data from the instruments? So I'm not sure I understand the question, Sean. So if you could restate that question down below, we'll get to it, I promise. Although people keep adding more questions. I thought we were getting better. We were down to like 86. We're back up to 94 questions, so we're getting there. Once a step one goes in, would there be a means to update them?
I just answered that.
Oh, you did?
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay.
Let me put on my Ben Bussey filter.
No, this lunar technology program call.
Lunatech.
Lunatech.
What they're referring to. Lunatech doesn't exist, and it is not now part of PRISM. That was a technology maturation program, and that's a call for things to fly.
Okay.
So it doesn't exist within PSD at all. Okay. Yay, return, sample return. Comment from Sean from Maston about the large mass return capability that can be turned on when there's enough demand. So take that as a note from the community. If you have a demand for it, so let's make it known so that we can get that turned on.
Although, to be fair, the purpose of PRISM is to select instruments to be taken to the lunar surface. If you have science that requires sample return, that isn't actually part of PRISM. So I would say, yes, letting us, we all know the value of samples. So I think that is a separate problem that at headquarters we have to address, which is, if we have CLPS providers who can bring samples back, it's a zero-sum game. What is the science value of paying a CLPS provider to bring back a sample? But that isn't what PRISM is about. PRISM is about the instruments that we would actually take measurements on the surface.
It's not, but it also could be valuable to inform sample return, though. I mean, you could imagine a suite of instruments being proposed, and we pop around to 3 or 4 different locations. We say, this is the site we want samples from because these suites of instruments have identified it, and then therefore that's a sample we take and bring back.
That's fair enough, but you're still justifying I would say that you're still justifying the science that you want to achieve. If your only science you're doing is bring this rock back, that's probably less compelling.
Then, right. So, yeah.
We're still working out exactly who selects the landing site destinations. Obviously, we're very aware of the multitude of documents that relate to this. It may be the case that best judgment is made from here at headquarters, at least for the first.
This question is about us versus the providers.
Oh, us, not providers.
Yep. We make that call, and we tell them where they have to go. The power. Let's see.
So the question about if everyone's encouraged because you're not reviewing, is that really lowering the bar? We argue that it is lowering the bar because if you, we'll stick with INA so we don't talk about any other sites. So, if we do a step 2 call saying we're going to INA, then it's lowering the bar because you only need to propose your INA related instrument. That's how we are arguing it's lowering the bar. I see what you're saying about you're still getting, but we're trying to lower the bar to the individual proposers, that they know that they are proposing something that is definitely applicable to where we're going to go.
Would you consider the infusion of new software? At this time, probably not, unless it's, no, I'm getting another head shake. Okay.
No, we're not at the stage now where we're looking to do scale of a discovery type mission. One of the things we think with, like I mentioned earlier, that we're always impressed by the ingenuity of the scientists, and so we suspect that we will get, a decadal science addressed through the instruments that we get from PRISM. But discovery, the moment you say discovery, then that one infers a certain cost, etc., etc. So certainly the goal here, as Sarah touched upon, is you've got the SCEM, you've got the decadal. That's how at least the science instruments are going to be reviewed against. So we will be doing really good science with these PRISM selected instruments.
I also want to be clear that this process has nothing to do with the discovery process and is not intended to bias the discovery process in any way. It's a totally separate focus, and CLPS is not intended to either usurp or impact the discovery process at all.
There's a question about, given that some locations can't do direct-to-Earth communications, is there a plan to provide communication relay? I would say that, again, your step 1, if you say, obviously, if you're going to go to a pole, at least most places you can see the Earth some of the time, unless you want to go, by definition, somewhere that you can't. And if your science is far-side science, again, please still submit that, even though we don't have a comm relay right now, because this helps us see what the demand is for a comm relay, or the additional science that we can get done by having the presence of a comm relay, which is required for the far side and is enhancing for most of the polar regions. I don't know what a multi-agent science payload is, if that person would like to expand on that.
Agencies, guessing.
Oh.
The agencies, international contributions, is my guess.
Yeah, please clarify that down below, and we'll get back to it.
The communication payloads, I think that would likely, if we received those as a step one, we would probably hand that over to STMD or talk to our STAN colleagues to see what they thought on the usefulness of flying it. How would you be conducting mission science definition studies to define the requirements needed? So I think how this will work is when we review the stage 2 proposals, we will obviously have on the review panel the scientists who again will be looking at the proposed science relative to decadal and other documents. I'm not sure I'm quite answering your question.
The next question talks about whether or not the Small Spacecraft Rapid Development Office procurement catalog is analogous, and we've been in discussion with them, and while there is some small amount of overlap, it doesn't necessarily port over to this effort one-to-one, but we are planning on leveraging their lessons learned from that effort.
Next one, yes, we are going to be happy to receive a stage 2 process that is for a suite.
All these questions, along with the video and audio, are going to be recorded and distributed out at the end of this, so the answer is yes.
Differences of process are there between this new stage 1, stage 2 concept and the traditional RFI, RFP process?
So I think the answer is we're going to have an ongoing stage 1 call, so you can submit at any time, and it will produce that catalog that we can then call for. I would say that is probably the largest difference between them, and that you can continue updating your stage 1 proposal as new information comes available. That's the primary difference. You guys think of any others off the top of your head? Okay.
So the question about the first opportunity penciled in for Q3 23, yeah, I apologize, I probably should deleted Q3. We're still trying to work out the exact time frame. Certainly it should be in 2023. As Brad touched upon, we're hoping to do a target date for stage 2 in the summer, next summer. So clearly we would have to have the call for stage 1 early next year is what we're hoping for. We're still trying to nail down the exact date. And to be honest, part of the feedback that we get from everyone here, things like this, and extra feedback to help us get PRISM right might well affect how quickly we get it out. If we get the idea that this is not a good idea, then we'll have to have a rethink. Yeah, I like the idea that the stage 1 template could have an optional section for stuff that we are allowed to share. That's something to consider. The one about Sampler as a robotic arm, which was selected through, Sampler is not selected to fly in 2021. Sampler is actually an LCP payload, and we haven't done the task order to fly it yet. That said, how do we make use of future builds of Sampler? What I would say is, if you're talking about you want to be an instrument on a robotic arm, or you want to be an instrument that gets fed regolith that's scooped up, then that goes into your step 1, so that we know that we have to ask for a delivery that can scoop regolith and put it into your instrument, for example.
We've already talked about cost.
We really are looking more at systems than subsystems. If you think it's particularly value subsystem to mature, then again you can put in the step 1, and that's something that we're probably more likely to share with STMD to see if they see it's worth flying.
How can we ascertain that our remote Raman experiment will be considered for both bio and geo studies, and what are the limitations for energy consumption? That will be incumbent upon you to make sure that information is available in your stage 1 proposals as valuable science in both types of locations, or for both mission directorates.
And the second part is, I mean, it's up to you whether you decide that you want to use your own solar panels. You would possibly want to, explain why you want to do that and not just use power from the lander. You might have a perfectly good reason that you need more power, you think, than what the lander will provide. So, obviously there's some of the providers you pay for the power that you use, and so, but equally you pay some level for the mass that you deliver. So if you're heavier but use less power, we're not going to necessarily know which is better value. But so I would say the more justification you can put in for why you want your own solar panels. I mean, if you're intending to survive the night and then keep working, then that would be one example.
Our scoring criteria giving added weight to IS, are you engineering demonstrations that also achieve science goals? And I think that question can be broadened out to any investigation that meets multiple goals of multiple science divisions and or mission directorates. So I took the action to broaden it out. You guys answered.
No, I think it's I think that's something, again, quite seriously, that we're grateful for questions like this that make us think of something we haven't necessarily addressed yet. But we realize that we certainly need to, ahead of expecting people to go to the effort of doing a step 2 proposal.
Just to reiterate, this is an ongoing discussion and collaboration between the various mission directorates and SMD divisions, and so we will all sit at the table together and determine what is a priority to everyone. And that said.
Yeah, and that also addresses 2 questions later about, yes, this is a joint catalog between the mission directorates. Regarding software development, no, that isn't really what we are after as part of PRISM.
Holy crap.
Instruments that will support future surface ops, I assume you're talking about humans on the surface, and that is a different category. We are thinking about instruments that will work with humans, but that is not this call.
Yeah, unless you're talking about acquiring data that would help future surface ops, whereupon, yes, please put in a step 1.
Well, I would also say that if your instrument would require crew interaction to deploy, then that's a completely different call.
And we're having a workshop next April that will specifically address the type of instruments that you're thinking of. List of topics that will be required for the step 1. I think we touched upon that in the presentation. If you go back and look at that, we gave a list of what we think we want. It's not possible to say how many proposals selected for funding because we'll have a cost associated with to generate a particular manifest. And so depending on how much things cost will depend on how many instruments are part of the manifest. We haven't thought about public-private partnership for this. It's not typical for certainly science payloads. So I would say that as part of your step 1, if you want to talk about the fact that you would offer public-private partnership to do with whatever you want flown, then let us know at that stage. Are you interested in descope or upscope options in stage 1? In principle, yes. Hadn't really thought about that. You asked a question whether it could affect the page limit, we'll take that on board and think about. In principle, more important at step 2. We're not looking for asking you to integrate it into a specific. We're not asking for an orbiter mission. We're not asking you to provide an orbiter here. We're asking you just to propose the payload suite. And in the case of the question, you can payload suite that would go on an orbit. That you would like that data acquired from orbit. Yes, we would accept ISRU technology demonstrations that would enable instruments to survive the night. No, we don't want to see a letter of support from a rover provider at this point. We just want your step 1 to tell us that you need a certain level of mobility to get your data. If your payload has to be part of a very specialized mobility system, then I think you let us know that as part of your step one, and we go from there.
We already talked about funding.
Yeah. No, we aren't going to be posting written responses to all these questions. We have the question about whether non-USA instruments should submit a step one proposal with a letter of support from the National Space Agency. No, I think it is better for potential international payloads to contact us directly, because you wouldn't be receiving funding as part of a step two. We wouldn't be asking you to put in a step two. So like I said, we are dealing with multiple space agencies that all have their own funding profile. So I would say that you either approach them to approach us, or you can come and talk to us directly, and then we will talk to your agency. If you want to be part of a suite, then that would mean that you would have to have already, just like in a discovery mission, you would have to assume you would have I see what you're saying. You're saying, if selected, then the agency will pay for it. That's a good question if that's what you mean. But then you would still be doing that as part of a suite. So at some level, you would be part of someone else's step one proposal. If you have something very small that you would like, yes, you could say that, this is the science if we only have it in one place, this is the additional science if we have it on more than one place on the lander, and separate to that, this is the science if it's on a roving platform. I don't think we have right now, we don't envision any restrictions on teaming arrangements.
I think the answer to that is we are open to all. Yeah.
Will PPE communication relays be provided to CLPS payloads? That really depends. What I would say is that will depend on whether the particular provider has the capability to talk to PPE. PPE has very specific communication capabilities, certain bands. So again, I think the answer here is your step one tells us we want to go somewhere where it will require communication relay, and we take it from there. PRISM website.
Yeah, it's work in progress.
Work in progress.
Yeah.
Where are we planning to post this information?
It will initially go out in an email blast where you all probably got all this information to join in, but we will, I'm sorry?
We need to put it somewhere on a website.
Oh, I know, but I'll just say it. So initially we'll put it up on the survey website just for a placeholder at the moment, and then we'll figure out where to go from there. It will end up on a planetary or LDEP site, or maybe even the CLPS site.
Yeah.
Yeah, the CLPS program site.
Yes, again, the next question about if you think you could provide a survive the night capability to other instruments, then we would like you to put in a step one. We don't yet have a mailing list that we could put people on. We tried with this call to hit multiple disciplines mailing lists, and given the fact we have over 300, I think we did all right.
Way more than 300.
I would suggest that if you're not already, you sign up for the NSPIRES mailing list.
Yep.
Come out through NSPIRES, and so you will get alerted through that.
Okay, we have a comment about suggesting that the phase one, step one proposal should focus purely on the science, and the step two should be the ones that focus on implementation. We'll take that on board, except that I think given the fact it's only 5 pages, we still need to have some feeling that it is feasible to do. And it certainly, yeah.
will you release the evaluation criteria for step 2, and how will these criteria be weighed? And we absolutely will, ahead of the step 2 process.
The call.
In the call itself. That's right.
Follow-up to a question about an integrated mobility special. Yeah, I think the answer is yes. If you think you have something which you can't, if you don't think it works for you just to say this has to be on a mobile platform that, in the case that you gave, can go into a lunar pit, but you have a way to do that, then just put that in, give us a step 1, and then we'll just consider you as an entire payload. But if it's more a classical case of you just want to be on a rover that can go and take measurements at different locations, I think that's different. But if you think you have very specific mobility needs and you have an answer to those needs, then let us know that. Okay, keep coming down. We've addressed that. Yeah, we've done that. Yeah, right now we don't have a maximum weight. Just remember that you can look at the user guides, and at some level, you know, we are obviously paying some level per kilogram to deliver these. So, you know, we'll be able to take more, just like with an orbital, you know, just like typically, if you're lighter, it's easier to get you there, but we're not precluding anything, particularly for this step 1, because the goal is to try and work out what capabilities we need to get to the lunar surface in order to allow you to do your science. Is that it?
No, they keep coming in.
If the instrument is funded outside of NASA, would it qualify for stage 2 funding only for the delivery to the lunar surface? Yes, I would think that is where you would submit it. But similarly, if you have something fully funded and ready to fly, you wouldn't necessarily have to do a stage 2 proposal. I think at that point you would come to us directly it's a good point. We should think about that. That's not a problem we expected to have, but a good one.
Oh, the spelling of NSPIRES, N-S-P-I-R-E-S, NSPIRES, NASA's proposal system. Thank you, Leslie.
Thanks, Leslie. I also got a bunch of private messages. I think I responded to everybody. If you did not get a response back from me, please feel free to email. Yeah.
Regarding foreign science instruments to be considered, remember NASA cannot give money to foreign entities. So there are 2 obvious ways to do this. If you are fully funded already, you can either work with a US PI to be part of a suite proposal, or you could have your agency reach out to NASA directly to have discussions.
I think their questions are starting to drop off here. So I think this might be a good point to call it. If you have further questions, please feel free to email us, and we'd be happy to get back to you as soon as we can.
We can't do that individually.
Okay.
Post them.
Okay, we will post them wherever we end up posting this.
Yeah.
The link to this video audio recording.
Could there be funding for US COI on a foreign instrument? I would say that if that foreign instrument is part of your instrument suite, then obviously you would have a science team that you're proposing as part of that suite. So it's kind of a yes. We already said that we are looking into trying to have the money to do a participating scientist program when we have these PRISM CLPS deliveries, which would expand on the science that gets done. Well, thank you, everyone. That was a very quick hour and a half. And like I said, we are happy to receive comments on this whole idea of a short step 1 followed by a step 2. Hopefully it does do the main goal of make it easier for you all to propose and help us get good instruments.
Was that a question that came in? Okay. Is that it?
Yeah. Okay, we're going to hang up. Thank you.
Thank you all.